Shalom, everyone. Thanks for your patience. Ruchim habayim. We're ready to get started. This is the launching of a series that should take us, Bezrat Hashem, through the summer. This is a series on the Shvatim, on the 12 tribes of Israel, more than 12 tribes actually, because I intend not only to profile the 12 sons of Yaakov, but also the sons of Yosef who are included in the tribes. So that brings us to I want to say, I can't even be exact and say 14, because perhaps Dinah will also figure in there, the daughter of Yaakov that we're aware of. But for now, we are working our way through the Shvatim as essential personalities within Tanakh. And I just want to devote a couple of minutes explaining why this is a topic that I was so excited, I am so excited to be learning together with you, and why I feel that it is a rich source of new insight that maybe has not fully been mined yet. Now, before I do so, just as a housekeeping note, if anyone has any questions, then please do write them in the chat. I will not get to them until the end of this year because I cannot multitask. Also, there will be time at the end of this year to ask any questions. And also, as always, please feel free to contact me via email with ongoing questions. I love this ongoing conversation that this platform has allowed for us and for me to be able to engage in. So please do continue the Talmud Torah between the shiurim. Now, as to the Shvatim, when back around well, I'll tell you, in about a month and a half, we're going to be celebrating my son's bar mitzvah, so I can say exactly. Back around 13 years ago, when I was expecting this child, I am a tour guide, and I was not able to guide the way that I had wanted to. I was on a certain bed rest situation, and so I started thinking of new itineraries, new ways to explore Eretz Yisrael. And I thought that were we to be in Eretz Yisrael in the time of the Hitnachalut, in the time of the Israelites' entry into the land of Israel and the division of the land of Israel into Nachalot, into territorial allotments that were granted to the tribes, then what would that look like? What would it look like, for instance, to guide a day Be'ikvot Shevet Dan, in the footsteps of the tribe of Dan? Where would I go? Where would I take tourists to? Or if I wanted to take them to Nachalat Naphtali, what would that look like? Would I have to pass border control? Would the dialect be different? Would it be like someone from Brooklyn going to Texas? And all of those questions started percolating, and this was fruitful material to pursue in the library, which I was allowed to do. It didn't require too much trekking and hiking, and that gave rise to my book on the Shvatim. So what we're going to be looking at primarily is the personality of the Shevet, and secondarily the contours of the territory that each Shevet was granted, and conceptual connections between the personality of the Shevet and the territory that he was granted. So this I found to be remarkable, a remarkable area of research, Ben Kotle Beit HaMidrash, within the Beit HaMidrash and within the academic library as well, in that the bulk of my source material is, as always, rooted in Sifrut Chazal, in our sage material, are the works of Chazal, secondarily in extra biblical source material from the ancient period, which is a particular interest of mine. And then thirdly, in the more classical exegetical material of the Rishonim and Achronim. But what I was finding, and I hope you'll see over the course of these shiurim, is that Chazal tend to hone in on a singular concept for each tribe, for each personality, and they will identify through the mechanism of midrash. They will repeat this concept, this identity that they've assigned to a tribe through midrash over and over and over again in many different contexts, such that when I would look back, for instance, at Reuven, I would see that there really is a strong thrust through Midrashic material, through Chazal's evaluation of the personality of the son of Yaakov into his development of a tribe with an almost singular concept. I will try and illustrate that with Reuven and then throughout all of the tribes that we explore together. So without further ado, let's get started with Shevet number 1. By the way, one last housekeeping note. When I submitted a hurried curriculum for this class, I just hurriedly wrote down the names of the Shvatim in the order that we are used to, the names of the tribes, and as we're used to absorbing them, I do reserve for myself the right to give you forewarning of at least a week, but to switch around the order if I feel that it is necessary, for instance, for me to do Gad next instead of Shimon. There would be good reason to group Reuven and Gad together and switch around the order. So with that, let's get into Reuven. Whenever we explore or begin to explore the concept of the Shevet, of the son of Yaakov, of the personality that develops into a tribe, then we always have to hit certain markers. And please nudge me if over the course of our shiurim together, you see that I'm not hitting these markers. The first and most elemental marker is the circumstance of his birth. Where was the mother in the circumstance of his birth? Because with only one exception, it is the mother who names the son. I don't know if this is such a forum for interaction, but if I were to be able to ask you, and you could weigh in, there are 2 times. One is where the mother and the father names the son, and then there's another circumstance where a male figure names the son. We're not sure who that male figure is, but those are the only 2 exceptions. I'll already let you know that, as you are already aware, most likely, when it comes to Binyamin, the mother and the father, Rachel and Yaakov give him a name, and the one who is the exception and who is named by a male is Levi. But all the other sons are named by their mothers, and it usually is reflecting the circumstance, one can even say the emotional state of the mother at this child's birth. So let's look together at Reuven's birth. Vayavo gam el Rachel, vayahav gam et Rachel melea. Yaakov, who had been duped into marrying the older sister Leah, he goes to Rachel, he marries Rachel, and it is clear that he loved Rachel more than Leah. Vayavod imo od 7 shanim acherot. And he worked for Lavan, his father-in-law, for an additional 7 years, beyond the 7 years that he had promised him in exchange for the hand of Rachel. Vayar Hashem ki snua Leah. God, one can say, as well saw that Leah was hated. I say as well because if we look in the previous pasuk, "V'yahav gam et Rachel meleah," that it seems that the extra measure of love and his initial love, which we're aware of from earlier verses, his emotional outpouring of love is for Rachel, and it is evident to. I could extrapolate and say all, but let's just limit it now to the Peshat. God saw that Leah was hated. Vayiftachet rachma b'Rachel akara. And he allows her to conceive. and Rachel remains barren. So it is through her conception that God is addressing the weak relationship between Yaakov and Leah. By allowing Leah to conceive, the steps will now be able to be taken to address the weaknesses in their relationship and for Leah to find her place within this very complex family structure. Vatahar Leah batelad ben. Leah conceives and she gives birth to a son by Tikra Shmo Reuven, and she calls his name Reuven. Ki amra, ki ra'a Hashem ba'onyi, ki ata ye'ahavani ishi. For she said, God has seen me, Resh Aleph Hey, the root to see, God has seen me in my distress, and now my husband will love me. So the intent on the surface level is that through bearing a son for Yaakov, that she acknowledges that God has granted her this child due to her distress, and that the child will be a means for her to connect to her husband. She will name her two subsequent children along the same emotionally distressed lines, Shimon and Levi, but she opens with Reuven. And I bring here for you, and for those who had downloaded the attached document, the Word document or the Google Docs that I had attached, there are a couple of sources that I hastily over the last hour just added, so I apologize that they don't appear in your printout, but you could look along with me on the screen. There are different ways that the Chazal are going to do a deeper read into the naming that Leah gives to her son, but they are all going to express the same distress that is evident in the Pshat. So initially, one can just look at the pasuk and say, Reuven, right? See that this is a boy. See, it's a son. I have arrived, Leah is saying, within Yaakov's household. Suddenly, I have a foothold. I have a place. Whereas my place was tenuous prior to this. Rachel had her place as the love of Yaakov's life, but I do not have my place. Reuven, I present you. It's almost like a Lion King moment, right? Like, I now can find my place in this household. I saw a beautiful explanation in the NJPS. It's just a volume that I have of the translation, and sometimes they have I wrote little notes on the bottom. And this was a very, very clever read of Ki ra'a Hashem ba'onyi ki ata ye'ahavani ishi, where here you see Reu and Ven. So it's a kind of a composite of God has seen, and now my husband will love me. So now I will be loved. Like Reuven, not see a son, as the first explanation went, but see that now I shall be loved through this son, right? It was kind of drawing the two, Kira'ah and Yehavani, together. If we look at the Midrash HaGadol for a third explanation of the naming of this boy, what the name means, Reuven, and what it could mean for Leah. My Reuven, what does Reuven mean? What was she crowing about? What was she exclaiming in her joy? This is a wonderful a midrash that I think is very relatable. When the baby is born and the father is counting 10 fingers, 10 toes, Reu ben habanim. See, this is a perfectly average, normal child. Nothing to draw attention to him or to me. Lord knows I have had undue attention and ridicule cast my way, given the whole debacle with the switching of the brides, and one can imagine the commensurate embarrassment that Leah must have felt. So here, this is a perfectly normal child. Lo arich v'lo gavetz. He's not too long. He's not too short. Lo chavir v'lo akum. He's not too pale. He's not too dark. He's just a normal child. And it was that normality that the Midrash is highlighting here that Leah is seeking. And the final explanation that I bring to you from this survey of Midrashic literature of what Reuven can mean, which again all hints to her, all dovetails into Leah's great relief, right? That something has changed for her. That there's a beginning now of her process, and she is in a new status where she had been flailing around prior. Reuven, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amra Leah. Rabbi Elazar says he's imagining what Leah is thinking. Ru'u ma ben bni leven chami. See the difference between my son Reuven and between my father-in-law's son Esav. And what she's saying here is, as we're very well aware, the firstborns of almost all the families in Sefer Bereshit never follow the law of primogeniture, right? They're always, they either themselves sin or fall, and they are never the chosen. They're always usurped by the younger. So see that my father-in-law's eldest, Esav, right, is my father-in-law, meaning Yitzchak, that his eldest was not a savory character, right? But my eldest, even though the Midrash here is putting thought into her mind, though he might sin, right? He will work to redeem himself. Although I would say that it's fair to read her exuberance here as, I have great hopes for this child. He means something deep to me in my unusual distress, given my circumstance, and he will form some sort of redemption, whether it's a personal redemption that he goes through on his own, transforming himself from a sinner into a penitent, or whether he stands as my redemption. Reuben, see this son over and against all of the other firstborns of Genesis. I'll leave that here for you to look more deeply into. Now, Reuven is marked from the very beginning, and here and there, because I always like the way that I put it in writing, because I think more about that than the way that I am just saying it offhand in a shiur. I will read here and there from a paragraph or a couple of lines that I wrote. I think that Reuven's loyalty to Leah is probably the secondary, it's one of it happens to be with Reuven. There are two dominant features that will emerge with Reuven. One is his personal loyalty to Leah, and the second will be his own personal journey after he sins. So let's take a look now, before I go into some of what I've written. Let's take a look now at his intense loyalty to this mother who became a mother through him. Vayelech Reuven b'mei ktsir chitim. There are some shvatim, some sons of Yaakov for which we have a great deal of information, others for which we have little to no information, and some like Reuven who do figure in the storyline, but not in a dominant sense, the way that Yehuda and Yosef will. But here, Reuven is a boy, and his mother has had three other children, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. She has ceased from giving birth. She had a secondary infertility, the verse tells us, the verse in Genesis tells us. And Reuven goes out, b'mei ktsir chitim, around June time, the time of the harvest of wheat. Vayimtza dudaim basadeh, and he finds these dudaim, colloquially translated as mandrakes, in the field. Vayavei otam el Leah imo, and he brings them back to Leah. Vatomer Rachel Leah, tzni li midudai benech. This is the first time we have a conversation between the sisters is recorded, give me your mandrakes. But I'd like to focus on Reuven and his loyalty to his mother, which in a way usurps his own pride of place, or his own sense of belonging in the family, in that he seems to sense that though Leah has borne 4 children to Yaakov, 4 sons to Yaakov, she still hasn't fully cemented her place in the family. Her confidence is shaky. And so in order to build her confidence, he sees that what has worked in the past to build her relationship with Yaakov has been to birth more children. So even though it will mean bringing more children into his mother's life, so as taking away, the attentions from the firstborn, still he feels such a loyalty that he brings these magical mandrakes, or this herb that perhaps has some potent fertility powers, to his mother. And it definitely demonstrates his loyalty. So much so that if we look at this wonderful Midrash Agadah, that it speaks to how hard he had to work to get these dudaim. It didn't come easily to him. Yisachar chamor gorem. In the context of the bracha that Yaakov gives to Yisachar on his deathbed, the son who will be born from Reuven's initiative to bring the dudaim to Leah. Leah will give the dudaim to Rachel in exchange for having Yaakov come to her that night, and from that union was born Yisachar. So Yisachar was essentially the product of this story. Yisachar chamor gorem. Yisachar, Yaakov blesses his son. You are a strong bone donkey. Gorem means strong. Al tikri'i gorem ela garam. Midrash will do the al tikri'i play here. Read it differently. I'm reading something different, deeper into this blessing. The Midrash says, don't read it as strong, but read it rather as caused by. Yisachar was caused by a donkey. Shalach Reuven besadeh u'matza dudaim. Reuven went into a field and he found dudaim. V'lo haya yodea mahim. He didn't know what they were. And so he tethered his donkey to these mandrakes. We're imagining they're not little delicate tulips, but some kind of a significant plant. And he went on his way. Masa chamor, ratzalav roach. The chamor was intuitively sensed the poison nature, the danger of these dudaim. That which causes fertility may also cause danger. V'ne'ekrucha dudaim, v'tza'aku tza'aka gdola u'met hachamor. And these mandrakes were uprooted, and that caused the death of the chamor, implying there was some kind of a causality between the mandrakes or their uprooting and this chamor. Kichen derech hadudaim. This is how one dealt with dudaim. You perhaps couldn't touch them, perhaps by uprooting them you would die, and this caused the death of the chamor. When Reuven came and he saw his dead donkey, he understood the connection. He's like, oh, these must be dudaim. And he brought them to his mother Leah, and from that union was born Yisachar. And so from that donkey that uprooted the dudaim, the Yisachar was born. So that's why we should read it, not Yisachar chamor gorem. Yisachar is a strong bone donkey, but Yisachar was caused by a chamor. That chamor garam be'etzem l'leidato. So I love this midrash because the midrash is clearly troubled first and foremost by the strange blessing that Yisachar, who we will learn is one of the most stable, happy, and pleasant of the tribes, should be thus described as the lowliest animal of a chamor. So the midrash here works to distance a donkey from the concept or from the personality of Yisachar. That's first and foremost. But also, the Midrash here wants to get to the circumstances of Yisachar's conception and remind us that Reuven was responsible for Yisachar's conception, and that he did not have to bring these dudaim to his mother, but it was clearly a gesture not just of love, but of a sensitivity to her distress. Now, when Rachel dies, and we're familiar with this story, and I don't want to, because of our limited time, I'll just allow you to read it for yourself inside. The outcome of the Rachel story is a sin that Reuven commits. Rachel's maidservant, her shivcha, was Bilhah. And after Rachel dies, Vayelech Reuven vayishkav et Bilhah pilegesh aviv. Reuven goes and he sleeps with Bilhah, the concubine of his wife. Vayishma Yisrael. And Yisrael hears of this. Yisrael meaning Yaakov, because we know that we're dealing with Yaakov, or even one can argue the entirety of Bnei Yisrael, but they're not called that yet. So I think that the simplest reading here is that Yaakov himself heard of this. We're not sure what his reaction is. When it comes to this particular event, there are many, many ways to look at this event. The simplest way to look at this is that Reuven slept with his aunt, with Rachel's shivcha, with her maidservant, with Bilhah, with his father's pilegesh. I know, as someone who is very interested in the broader historical context of the Bible, that in Aramean law would have been the law of the Padan Aram, or Aram Naharayim, the area of Lavan, that upon the death of a woman, all the property goes back to her father's house, all the property that she had brought with her. And Bilhah was given to Rachel by Lavan. So in a sense, from that read, Reuven was claiming as representative of Beit Lavan, he was claiming his grandfather's property. I thought that was an interesting aside, but that's really getting very far from where I'd like to take this, which is that Reuven here commits some kind of an error. The extent of the error is debatable. I explained the pshat. I think that that's incontrovertible. However, it's not quite incontrovertible. Were it to be incontrovertible, then we would not have the following two verses immediately follow the sin of Reuven. And that is as follows. Vayehu b'nei Yaakov shnei masar. The sons of Yaakov were 12. B'nei Leah bechor Yaakov Reuven. Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun. And here we begin the listing of the Shvatim. The sons of Leah, also the firstborn of Yaakov, is Reuven. So I reject the reading that the simplest way to understand the sin of Reuven is as a sexual violation of sleeping with Bilhah, because were it to be so, then it does not, to me, make sense that the following two psukim so strongly emphasize the cohesiveness of the sons of Yaakov as Shnei Masar, without one being disqualified for a grave violation. And additionally, that B'nei Leah Bechor Yaakov, not just is Reuven the son of Leah, but he still, in this context, maintains a firstborn status, maintains a prime status. And so I think that these are the textual pins that will allow Chazal so easily. I remember in academia, the word would be used would be whitewash. And this would be a statement, oh, you have the sages who are whitewashing the sin of Reuven. I don't think that that is at all accurate because I don't think that reflects a close reading of the text. I think when Chazal say that Reuven did not sleep with Bilhah, but rather some other violation was committed, that they are claiming that because they are acutely sensitive to these verses that follow immediately afterwards in the text. And so here, again, for need of time, I will have to just paraphrase, and you can read along in the Hebrew and the English of Bereshit Rabbah. But I bring this midrash to illustrate the earliest written evidence that we have of the sin of Reuven not being sexual in nature or being only mildly sexual in nature. What do I mean by that? I'll jump right to the definition. Elbon imo tava. Reuven, who was so absolutely sensitive and loyal to his mother, Leah, bore the great humiliation of what had happened just after Rachel had died, which is that Yaakov moved his bed into Bilhah's tent and not into Leah's tent. So as to comfort himself with the extension of Rachel, he continues a home relationship, a sexual relationship with Bilhah, as opposed to the prime mother, Rachel's sister, Leah, Reuven's mother. El Boni Motava. He bore this great distressing humiliation. As long as Rachel was alive, then the default place for Yaakov to sleep would be in her tent. To, as I said, fill the lacuna of Rachel, Yaakov moved Bilhah's bed into his tent, or they would be together. Amar lo daya leima leitkna b'chaye achota ela af la'achar mota. It's not enough that my mother always be second to her sister in her sister's life, but even in her sister's death, she should still be second. Allah v'kilkela tayitzuin. This we're all familiar with Rashi, right? Which is that he switched the beds around. He interfered in his father's private affairs. That would be, in Chazal's read, the extent of his sin, a sin nonetheless, in that it is not the place of a son to interfere in such affairs, but not to the egregious extent of actually sleeping with Bilhah. And so the context, by the way, this is a famous midrash that appears in Masechet Shabbat, Nun Hey, I believe it's Nun Hey Amud Bet, in this whole litany of Misha Omer She blank chata eno ela toeh. Misha Omer she Reuven chata, whoever says Reuven sins is making a mistake. Misha Omer she David chata, whoever said David sinned with Bathsheba is making a mistake. These are called, again in academia, the whitewash midrashim. And to me, it seems that, again, that Chazal are not trying to apologize. This isn't apologia. This is a sensitive, acutely sensitive reading of the entirety of the text, not just the local situation that I pointed out here, V'yu b'nei Yaakov shnemasar, b'nei Leah b'char Yaakov, Reuven, but also the broader context of Tanakh, which, of course, in Chazal's world's view is one cohesive document. So that if you have in Dvarim, Aror Shochev im Eshet Aviv, if you have the 6 tribes on Har Eval and the 6 tribes on Har Grizim, this scene that Moshe is painting for what will happen when the Israelites enter into the land of Israel, you shall head straight to Shechem, to these 2 mountains that loom over Shechem. 6 tribes will be on Har Eval, including Reuven, and that you face Har Eval and you lay out the 12 curses on Har Eval, one of those curses being Aror Shochev im Eshet Aviv, cursed is he who sleeps with his father's woman. Then the the argument that the Midrash is bringing is it must mean that Reuven was totally exonerated or was never accused of such an egregious sin, that he would never have done such a thing, because and I'll read it in English here. Is it possible that he is destined to be one of the 6 tribes that were standing on Har Eval and he performed this very act? No, it's impossible that we would that the scene here would encompass something as humiliating, as excoriating a tribe for their father's act. So this is what the Midrash uses, a much later context to release Reuven from that sin. Rashi will take it into a much narrower context, the one that I had anticipated and I brought a few minutes ago, in that following verse, Vayu b'nei Yaakov shnei masar, מתחיל לעניין ראשון משנולד בנימין נשלמה המיתה ומעתה ראויים להימנות. His first reading is that because Benjamin had just been born, then now the 12 tribes are complete, but it doesn't sit well with Rashi. Rashi could have left it there. He could have said, now that Benjamin is born, now it's time to say, V'yu b'nei Yaakov shnei masar. We're done. 12 tribes. There had always been an intention for 12 tribes in the fates. And so now we are complete and we can count the 12 tribes. But Rashi isn't satisfied with that answer for the simple reason that the pasuk, Vayu b'nei Yaakov shnei masar, does not come immediately after Binyamin's birth, but rather it comes after the sin of Reuven. So that is why Rashi has to bring a drash, v'rabotzenu darshu, lilamdenu ba, shakulan shavin, v'kulan tzadikim, shalo chata Reuven. That it must be related to the sin of Reuven to indicate to us that all of the tribes were tzadikim and that Reuven did not sin in the way that the verse seems to lead us. Now, I would like to read to you now. Now is where I think is the right place to turn to how I articulated this in writing. What I've tried to demonstrate up until now through the psukim and through Midrash is Reuven's intense loyalty to Leah, such that not only will he bring her the dudaim, but also he will meddle in his father's affairs because of the personal slight he felt that his mother was suffering from. There is something about firstborns, I believe, that makes them vulnerable to the vicissitudes of their mother's feelings. I'm a firstborn, so I feel that I can state this with some authority. Even more so than their fathers. They are the first to bear the brunt of her love, of her disappointment, of her dreams. The firstborn opens the woman, and then she is a mother. Forever after, she will always be a mother, and the child has made her so. And this first child feels the first full force of the mother's stumbling attempts to learn how to mother. If the mother is successful, the child will fiercely love her back. So it was with Reuven. The staunch, pure loyalty to Leah was so central to his character that it dominated his tribal symbols. So when I go through each of the Shvatim, I said that I have to hit certain markers. One marker is his conception story, and the second marker is his naming. The third marker, which is consistent through all the Shvatim, will be Yaakov's blessing to the Shevet, and the fourth marker will be Moshe's blessing at the end of Chamisha Chomshei Torah to the Shevet. So Yaakov blesses his son, and Moshe blesses the tribe. These are the 4 essential markers. In addition, if there are storylines, such as the one we saw with Reuven, and we will see in some subsequent stories with Reuven, those are also important to introduce to develop his character. But in addition to that, there are other markers that Midrash will mark as consistently highlighting the personality of each shevet. So, for instance, the the flag of each shevet as they traveled through the wilderness. This is, of course, far after the sons of Yaakov have passed and they have developed into tribes, and each tribe is represented by a mata, and we're not given information in the text of Bamidbar of what was embossed or emblazoned on each flag, but I'm fairly certain that most of you, if not all of you, if you go to your synagogues, then you will find some kind of an iconography indicating what the symbol of the shevet is, and it is most likely taken from their flag. This is delivered to us in Bamidbar Rabbah, in Numbers Rabbah, what was on their flag. So what would you think would be on the flag of Reuven, given his loyalty to Leah? It's the Dudaim. It's the mandrakes. And in addition to that, the stones that are on the Choshen HaMishpat, on the priestly breastplate, 12 stones in total, each of them representing the tribe. We are given the names of the stones in the text. We know that Reuven's stone was the Odem. Now, this is just a happy coincidence. Odem means ruby, right? Now, that Ruby and Reuven are the same, I think is just a coincidence, considering that the etymology of ruby, rubeus, is Latin, not related to Aleph Daled Mem of the Semitic languages. But the flag itself, the Midrash tells us, was red, and the ruby stone, the Odem stone, was red. And when it comes now, don't get all I don't know the right word. Don't get annoyed if I mention this. This is not something that I personally have any knowledge about. I'm only quoting Rabbeinu Bechaye. Rabbeinu Bechaye, who I believe was a 12th century Rishon, was convinced that stones had, or crystals, or different minerals had different properties, and have healing properties and have damaging properties. This is something that continues. It's some kinds of a wisdom, I guess, that continues up through today. I do not even dabble in this. I do not have any information other than Rabbeinu Bechaye. So I'm just quoting to you here from Rabbeinu Bechaye, who says that the quality of the Odem stone is to improve your chances of conception, such that, and I will tell you as a Baba Maisa, I am aware of friends and acquaintances who, when trying to conceive, would sleep with a ruby under their pillow. So all of these elements, the flag with the dudaim, the color of the flag being red, the color of red, a symbol of fertility, the color of the stone, the odem, the qualities of the stone, all are indicative of Reuven's connection to Leah. Now, Reuven is not only worried, as all firstborns are anxious, naturally anxious. Reuven is not only worried about his connection to Leah, he is, of course, also looking to please both of his parents, including Yaakov. Gidon, is it a question that can wait till the end, or am I not coming in clearly? I see you raised your hand. Oh, okay. All right. And when it comes to his father, he does have quite a bit of work to do, in that Vayishma Yisrael, Yisrael had heard what had been done. He didn't respond, but he kept an awareness. We are aware that Yaakov knows what had happened with Bilhah, whatever it was that had happened with Bilhah. And it's almost as if it is held in abeyance until Yaakov's deathbed, when he lets loose on Reuven with, one cannot view this as much of a blessing as almost a curse. Reuven bechoriata. Now this is powerful, because he is reiterating on his deathbed to Reuven that you are my firstborn, not you were my firstborn. it's an echo of what we saw right after the sin with Bilhah. B'nei Leah, Bechor Yaakov, Reuven. Reuven, Bechoriata. Reuven, you are indeed my firstborn. Kochi v'reshet oni. My might, the first fruit of my, one can say oni might be vigor, might be pain. Yeter se'et, v'yeter az. But there's too much. There was too much passion within you, Reuven. Pachas kamayim al totar. You were tempestuous. You acted brazenly. And so you shall no longer hold that pride of place. Ki alita mishkevei avicha. You mounted your father's bed, or you got into my bedroom affairs. Az chilalta. That disqualified you. Yitzui Allah. You went into my yitzuim, into my sheets. You went into my affairs. And this is Yaakov's final assessment of Reuven. We can only imagine leaving Reuven despondent, but I would like to try and explore in the few minutes that we have left. And by the way, it doesn't seem like we're going to be able to deal with the entire Shevet in one shiur, because some Shvatim are just too large to encapsulate in one shiur. So that for those who plan on staying through the entire series, I will be continuing with Nachalat Reuven in next shiur and describing Nachalat Reuven and the connections between the Shevet and the Nachala. So I won't be able to get to it all in one shiur. But now getting back to what happened.
Excuse me a minute. Would you be talking about the role of Reuven in Mechirat Yosef?
Yes, absolutely. So that's what I'm dealing with. That's how I'd like to, with the time left in this shiur, I'd like to finish talking about what happened in the lifetime of Reuven, where Reuven does seem to make efforts to lead and to assume the position of the firstborn as a leader, such that when the brothers are all gathered up in Shechem, in the Shechem region, and Yosef is sent from Hebron by Yaakov to check for their welfare, and they see Yosef arriving, and they plan on killing him. L'chu v'nahargehu, let us kill him, and we shall throw his corpse into one of the cisterns. Vayishma Reuven vayatzilehu miyadam. Reuven hears this, and he saves Yosef from their nefarious plan to kill him. Lo nakenu nafesh, let us not kill him. Al tishbechu dam. No, it's a terrible idea to commit fratricide. Instead, hashlichu oto al habor hazeh, throw him into this cistern that's in the wilderness, but don't yourself break his neck or stab him through. The intention was leman hatzilo tomi adam, so that Reuven could later save Yosef, remove him from the bor, and return him to his father. And we know what happened in the interim after Yosef was thrown into the bor, and this very, very dark, vayeshvu lechol lechem, the brothers all sit to feast as Yosef is off in, suffering in the cistern. And then Yehuda, in one of the coldest moves in the entirety of Tanakh, sells his brother. Ma betza, what gain do we have? Let's figure out how we can earn some money from this, how we can gain from this. Sells him to the passing Yishmaelim, Midyanim, and Reuven only then comes back. Vayashav Reuven el habor, v'hinei ein Yosef babor vayikrat begadzav. Reuven returns to the bor, and Yosef is not there, and he starts tearing his clothes. Again, Vayashav Reuven, Vayashav el achav. He returns to his brothers. Vayomer hayeled einenu, mani ana ani ba. Right? He does not know how he can survive from this debacle, how he will go back to his father and show himself a failure as the firstborn who was meant to take responsibility for the integrity of Am Yisrael for all of his brothers. And so here, Reuven had tried, but he failed. Now, what is the natural question here? Vayashav Reuven. Where is Reuven returning from? How come he is absent from this whole the exchange and the sale of Yosef to the Yishmaelim? That's where the Midrash is going to not only fill in the lacuna, but indicate something about the process that Reuven is engaged in. Vayashav Reuven el habar in Bereshit Rabbah. Reuven returns to the bor. Where was he? Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, bisako uvitanito. He was in the prayerful posture of the penitent. I think I wrote it like that. I like that alliteration. He was engaged in mourning. Kishanafla halach veitzitz loto bar. Kishanifna. What was he mourning about? He wasn't mourning necessarily about Yosef because he intended to save Yosef. He was engaged in constant penitence over his sin with Bilhah. And when he finished his flagellation or he finished his hitbodedut, then he returns and he looks inside the bor. Vayashav Reuven el habor. He returns to the bor. Amar lo hakadosh baruch hu. Me'olam lo chata adam lefanai v'asat tshuva. Hoppa, Reuven, you introduced something new into the world. Never before has anyone sinned. Now, the only sin that Reuven had done had been with Bilhah, so that's why he must have been doing penitence over that sin and not over something related to Yosef. Never has somebody sinned and engaged in the process of tshuva. You introduced tshuva to the world, Reuven. Chayecha, sheben bincha omeru patech b'tshuva tchila. Your standard, your quality that you will bring into Am Yisrael will be tshuva, such that the golden boy of Reuven, who will come as a prophet many generations on, Hoshea ben Elah, from Shevet Reuven, will educate all of Bnei Yisrael in tshuva. Be'ezeh ze Hoshea shne'emar shuva Yisrael ad Hashem Elokecha. Hoshea, who brings to Am Yisrael the haftarah that we recite every Shabbat Shuvah between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the 14th chapter of Hosea. Return, O Israel, to Hashem your God. And the schar, as it were, for Reuven, for his embarkation in this path of tshuva, would reach its fruition many, many generations on. But here the Midrash is painting a very sympathetic portrait of Reuven. Reuven, who had sinned, who was flawed, who was trying to make amends, but who fails. He fails in his leadership role here, and he also fails in his leadership role when it comes to saving Shimon, and when it comes to saving Binyamin. And let's see how that plays out. Before though, I realized I skipped over this wonderful midrash that is in the same kivun, the same direction as the previous midrash. Hashem said, "Ata patachta tchila b'hatzalat nefashot." You were the first one who tried to save a life. So the first Ir Miklat, the first city of refuge that will be allotted to the Israelites that will save the life of someone who committed manslaughter, will be in your territorial allotment, will be in your nachala at Betzer Bamidbar, the first Ir Miklat, the first city of refuge that's listed in Dvarim is Betzer, and that is in the nachala of Reuven. So getting back to where Reuven tries, he tries with Mechirat Yosef, but he fails. He's engaged in tshuva for Bilhah. That was an important point that also arose in that context. He tries again when Shimon is held captive by Tzafnat Paneach, by the erstwhile Tzafnat Paneach Yosef in Mitzrayim, and the brothers have to return to Yaakov and say, Yaakov, unless we produce Binyamin for this Egyptian leader, then we will not be able to redeem Shimon. And Reuven is the one who gets up first as the firstborn. Vayomer Reuven el aviv leimar, et shnei banai tamit im lo aviacha elecha, t'nal toal yadi v'ani ashivenu elecha. I promise the death of my two sons if I don't return Binyamin to you. And it's just such a it's a moment that I have to read to you how I wrote it up, because I think it's such an extremely powerful moment, where essentially um, he he exposes his distress in all of his complexity. The insanity of Reuven's offer causes the reader and the text to stop short. What kind of craziness is that? Is this to say, I'll kill my sons, right? Or you can kill my sons if I don't bring back Binyamin. We are relieved that the text compassionately omits Yaakov's response, sparing us and Reuven head-on exposure to Reuven's pain. Yet Yaakov's reaction is implicit in his contemptuous refusal to respond. He just says, as we see in the Midrash here, Rebbe Omer, Harei ze bechor shoteh. This Reuven of mine, this firstborn, he's insane. What a kind of crazy, foolish offer is that? Banecha lo banayhem? My grandsons aren't my own children? Right? Like, why would I ever consider killing my grandsons? So, like, he just doesn't even bother to respond. We see this pachas kamayim element of Reuven coming out, this tempestuosity, this need to try and passionately solve the problem, whether with Mechirat Yosef, or whether here, he just does not succeed in solving the problem. I have just a few more insights before we'll wrap up the shiur. That was the painful, I bring this particular episode brings home a painful truth embedded in Reuven's mad offer. He truly did not realize that his sons were Yaakov's grandsons. Reuven believed that Yaakov did not care about the grandsons from Leah's children, that only Rachel's children counted. Embedded within Reuven is this passionate connection to Leah, this concern for Leah, and the awareness that Leah's role and the role of her children do not come easily in this family. And the only natural, easy connection is with Rachel and her children. He thought that Yaakov was willing to act to protect Binyamin, but not Shimon. Shimon, of course, being the son of Leah. That Yaakov mourned Yosef, but would not mourn Reuven's children. Deeply rooted anxiety was Reuven's birthright. Vayar Hashem ki snua Leah. Hashem saw that Leah was hated, and so he granted her a son to begin building her relationship with Yaakov, and that anxiety never dissipated. Now, I will just end the shiur with a summary that the hallmarks of Reuven are as an extension of Leah, as the first expression of Leah, as the anxious expression of Leah, the sense of, will I be able to find my place in this family? A certain instability that he brings to the stories that we find with him, in not being able to successfully lead the family, whether it was in not being able to save Yosef from his brothers, not being able to be the leader to bring Binyamin in his care to Mitzrayim. And so, Az chilalta yitzui ala pachas kamayim al totar. Reuven, you will not have the primacy of leadership within Am Yisrael. Was all lost? Was that it? Was Reuven just condemned, as it were, to just constantly trying and not succeeding? At the end of Chamisha Chomshei Torah, we have Moshe's bracha, Yechi Reuven, ve'al yamot, v'hi mitav mispar. Though he will be few in number, though he is not prime, Reuven will live. He will not die. He will continue on. He has a place within this family. It is a fraught place within the family. It is an uncomfortable place within the family that the firstborn is not the prime. But he is part of Bnei Yisrael Shtei Misrei. He's part of Bnei Yisrael. And bear with me, please, just for 1 or 2 more minutes while I demonstrate how the tribe of Reuven does redeem himself. And I'll just paraphrase here the story that I brought in Bamidbar. You will remember that Reuven and Gad, when they developed into tribes, they fancied the lands that were on the eastern side of the Jordan because they had much cattle and it suited them. And Moshe was very, very concerned at the ramifications of their request to remain on the eastern side of the Jordan. He felt this stunk of secession, that this was a danger to the integrity of Am Yisrael, and that they would separate and form their own nation. And so Reuven and Gad reassure him, and they say, no, that is not our intent. Not only do we not plan on separating from Bnei Yisrael, we will be the vanguard. We will lead Bnei Yisrael in their war of conquest westward over the Jordan as we all together engage in the conquest of Eretz Yisrael. And Yehoshua praises them for the 14 years that they left their home on the eastern side of the Jordan, and they served Am Yisrael. And he says, Lo azavtem et achechem. You did not leave your brothers all of these years until now, 14 years on. Vishamartem et mishmeret. And you kept up the good fight. You kept your guard. You kept on your position. Mitzvat Hashem Elokechem. You kept the instruction of 2 ways to read it there, Vishamartem et mishmeret, or Vishamartem et mishmeret Mitzvat Hashem Elokechem. You did as you said you would do. Is this not a tikkun? Is this not a rectification of the son of Yaakov, who was impetuous, who couldn't find his way to leadership, who tried again and again to lead but failed? Here you have a tribe who for years on end are leading Am Yisrael in their battle and have left their own comforts aside, their families aside, to make sure that Am Yisrael as a nation accomplishes what they are meant to accomplish. So I see that Reuven does assume this mantle of leadership as a tribe, and that Reuven bechori ata, when Yaakov embedded in his last will and testament to Reuven, you are my firstborn. Yes, Reuven, you are my firstborn. You haven't lost that status. There's an element of Reuven that is still the firstborn, that is still the leader. It only just comes into fruition later on in the development of the tribe. But as we see with Reuven, his great loyalty to his mother was imprinted on his personality, and his subsequent tshuva for how he treated his father would have also ramifications in his tribal triumph through the golden boy of Reuven, Hoshea ben Elah, the prophet that would instruct us all towards teshuvah. Bezrat Hashem, next week we will look at the nachala of Reuven and see why it is so suited to this complicated firstborn son. So now I will go to
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. How old do we think Reuven was at the time of the Dudaim? It is, I would say, I don't know. The way to answer that from a Chazal point of view would be to go to Seder Olam Rabbah, to a very ancient book of Sefer of Midrash, the chronology of Chazal, and they might say that, if I recall, their calculation is that all of the tribes were born within a very short time frame in Padan Aram, in Aram Naharaim of Lavan, and then Binyamin was born shortly after the entry into the land of Israel. But wait, we're talking about Yisachar. So I'm sorry. If it would be a short time frame, then we would say that Reuven was a young boy when before Yisachar was born. So that would be Chazal's answer. My pleasure. And yes, if there are any other questions, I'm happy to take questions. Okay. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to upload my map of the tribal allotments to the Torah in Motion site. So you'll have it to look at over this week and in anticipation of next week's shiur. So I'm going to leave to everyone here. If you'd like, my email address, and please do be in touch with any questions. And I wish you all a Shavua Tov.